So let's move on to the final major, actually that's the biggest new feature in GraphDB 8. It's OntoRefine. As you remember, when I first told you about new menu structure, under import there was this tabular OntoRefine thing. And if we go there, you get to OntoRefine. So OntoRefine is basically OpenRefine, and OpenRefine is in turn previously called Google Refine. So it's Google Refine, then OpenRefine, and then OntoRefine. And OntoRefine can do everything that OpenRefine can, but with some additional benefits that you're going to see in a bit. And all the StarRefine programs support importing data in various formats. As you can see here, the formats are listed. And for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to use a very simple CSV file. So I click on this icon here to select my file, and the file I have is a list of US presidents that was taken from some free repository of CSV data. And then to actually import the file, I press next. So Refine is really good at determining the right settings for a given CSV file, because those can vary quite a bit. And it correctly figured out that my file is delimited by commas, and that the first line of my file is the column headers, and so on. And if you're happy with this preview here, you don't have to do anything. You can just click Create Project. Or if you see something wrong, you can tweak with these settings to get Refine to parse your file correctly. So it looks fine to me. That's why I'm just going to click on Create Project. And there is my CSV data. And at this point, I think this looks the screen looks kind of too narrow to me. So it's the right time to show you another cool thing in GraphDB 8. If you are already familiar with this menu structure, you can press this icon here to collapse the menu and get more screen space. And at this point in OntoRefine, you can apply all the transformations supported by OpenRefine as well, such as editing things or normalizing data or whatever. And so what's the difference between OntoRefine and OpenRefine? It's the thing is that we wanted to have something that provides converts tabular or legacy data to RDF, and that's what our OntoRefine can do. Unlike the standard OpenRefine, we have this sparkle button here, and if we press this button, we get to a Sparkle editor. Note that this Sparkle editor isn't the same as the one available from the Sparkle menu. So if it says OntoRefine here on top, it's the OntoRefine Sparkle editor. And if I execute this very simple query here that just selects everything, I get some RDF data that's converted from the tabular data that I imported into Refine. So if we go back to the table and look at the first row, that's George Washington, the first US president, and that's his name, Wikipedia link, and then the date he took office, left office, the party that supported him, and then there's a picture and his home state. If we go back to the Sparkle editor and look at the actual data that we selected, we see that that's actually George Washington. And for each row in the CSV file, we've generated a bunch of RDF statements where the subject is based on the row number, such as year-end row 1 for George Washington. And then it's of type row, and then there is this automatic predicate row number, because you might want to have that as a number instead of having to parse it from the URI. And then for each column in the CSV file, we created predicates that correspond to the actual data. So for example, for the name, so that column, if we go back to the table, so the column with the name is called president, and correspondingly, our property is called URN column as in the symbol column, and then column as in COL, abbreviation from the word column, and then so it's a URN call president. And note that this data is taken directly from the imported CSV file in Refine. So whenever you edit something in OntoRefine, so let's try to edit George Washington's name to George Washington II. And as you can see, it changed here. And if we go back to the Sparkle editor and run the same query again, you see that you immediately get the change in your RDF data. So this RDF data is still only into OntoRefine and not in your GraphDB repository. So how to get it there? Oh, it's very easy. So first you need to get this Sparkle endpoint link by clicking here, and it's something that you have to copy, which I just did. And then you need to go to the other Sparkle editor. So that's the Sparkle and the main Sparkle editor of GraphDB, the one that uses the currently connected repository. And this is still my one of the masters from the cluster I created earlier, so I'm just going to use that. And in Sparkle there is many people don't know about that, but in Sparkle you can connect from so you can run your queries against one repository directly, but you can also connect to remote Sparkle endpoints within the same query. This is done by wrapping your statement patterns into the service keyword. And for the service keyword, you need to provide the URL to the remote endpoint. And this is exactly the URL that I copied just a bit ago from the OntoRefine. And now if I run this query, I get the data that's in my OntoRefine project. So this number here in the URL actually corresponds to the project ID from OntoRefine. And this is a select. I can do all kinds of selects here, but it's still not in my GraphDB repository. In order to get it there, I have to do an insert. And the simplest insert you could do is this. So this will basically take everything from the remote endpoint, in our case, the OntoRefine endpoint, and then insert exactly the same data into the current GraphDB repository. And as you can see, the subjects here are called URN row 1, 2, 3, and so on, which might be useful for some cases, but most often you need to modify your data a bit, for example, generate different URIs or so. And we have a very nice tutorial on YouTube for how to do such things with OntoRefine, and you can also look at our documentation for more information about OntoRefine. That's why I'm showing you here only a very simple insert, just to show you that you can get the data from the CSV into the GraphDB repository. And now if I execute this insert statement, I have about 400 statements that were inserted into GraphDB. And if we go back here to the home screen, you'll see that this has changed. We only had 70 statements before that because I had created the cluster with new and empty repositories. And again, those 484 explicit statements came from Refine, and these 19 third ones are either inferred statements or system statements that are needed for inference to work. And if we now go to, let's say we use this, no, sorry, let's go back to the Spark later. And if you remember that the property name for the name of the president was called this, you could do a select like this. And this should return you the names of all the presidents as well as the URI. And if we execute this query, we now get so the URI for each president and the name for each president. And now this data came from my GraphDB repository and not from Refine. So if I now go back to OntoRefine and change George Washington's name again, it will not change in the GraphDB repository. You have to import the data again in order to get that change.